program off. This will be my fourth, I believe, Women Entrepreneurship Week event, so we're really excited about this one. But before we begin, I want to have some opening remarks from a good friend of mine, General Linda Singh. So, General.
Make sure I'm standing in the right place. So first, I want to say welcome to everyone that's in attendance, not just in the room, but online. And if I could, just think about what Women Entrepreneurship Week means. I mean, it means everything, right? I mean, if you think all the way back to World War I, World War II, when women, when the men went off to war, the women took the jobs in the factories, right? They started really creating that industrial industry. And so if you think women back then and the role that they played in keeping the economy going, it's the same role that women entrepreneurs play today. And maybe even in a much bigger part, right? Because we see women creating huge, inventions, things that are working towards solving for, our medical challenges. I mean, there was one woman organization through COVID last year that did the clear mask. There's a woman, entrepreneur that I know that's helping us to connect all different kinds of businesses through their technology. So, I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. And so I would encourage you to step into your newness, your oneness, as you think about how you're going to take your organizations forward. And if you're just, teetering on the edge of thinking about entrepreneurship, I would tell you to go ahead and take the leap and do it right here at the Towson Startup Center, right? I mean, this is the place for you to be able to be with other individuals and just get really creative. There is nothing that the mind cannot achieve if you allow it just to run and let that energy go and then get really still and quiet and then say, now that I've got the idea, let's run with it. Let's move forward. And I would love to see you all do that here with Towson or maybe at one of the other innovation centers, but this is an amazing place to do it. It's an amazing place in space. And so thank you. My heart goes out to you, and I will tell you, this month is Women-Owned Month. And so if you really want to change the trajectory, do just one thing. Buy woman-owned. Just take one item that you get every single day and buy woman-owned. Thank you.
I have to humble brag on her. So just yesterday, Governor Larry Hogan gave her an award, and there is now a full building in the Maryland National Guard named after the general. So we're really happy to have her.
I wouldn't say that, it wasn't about entrepreneurs.
Okay, so again, thanks for being here at this important event. So we have a great panel. We've been in the back talking for the past hour. I'm really excited about this. So how about we tell the audience a little bit about yourselves and your ventures, and we'll start with Juliana.
Sure. Thank you guys all for having me and hosting me first and foremost. I'm Juliana. Buonanno. I am the CEO and founder of TechSlice. TechSlice is a software development firm that specializes in creating custom medical software. And we've recently been positioning ourselves to really support different ranges of startups in the medtech community through different stages of growth.
Excellent.
I'm Delaney Fox. My company is Minutes for Moms. We bring high quality local care providers to local families on demand.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stacey Stube. I am the founder of BROMO. We took over an abandoned garment factory in Baltimore, and we're here to revitalize the industry, but also the skill sets that are fading around the world. So we are a global fashion trade school located in Baltimore, Maryland, USA.
Thanks, this is great. And again, I just kind of have to humble brag when I can. So Delaney's also a fellow of the second cohort of the accelerator here at Startup. And we're certainly very proud of her and happy to have her back here today. So, all right. The big thing, we were in the back talking about ideas, right? You see some quotes on the outside about ideas. And everybody has an idea, but what distinguishes what we have on today and actually Venture Starting is at what point do you go out there and start something and pursue that idea? So, Juliana, I guess I'd ask you, when you started TechSlice, were there any metrics that you used in saying, okay, I'm going to start this right now?
No, I think it essentially came from a demand of, we were doing work and really learning. It took me about 2 years before I actually kicked off the business, a year of kind of doing free work to learn. I was a recruiter before, taught myself how to code, and the best way to learn is to work on actual projects. And eventually, clients are like, no, my account's gonna kill me, my books are gonna look weird, we have to pay you something. So we ended up opening up a bank account, and TechSlice was born. But outside of that, I feel like for me to really commit full time to my startup and be 110% every day with it, it really took me running 2 software companies and being 8 months pregnant with my daughter for me to be like, you know what, this is what I'm doing in life, this being more intentional about my time and saying, this is the impact I want to have on the world. So it really took that moment, 8 months pregnant, for me to fully commit in 2 years.
Well, there's no recipe, so
Yeah.
it's okay if it's 8 months pregnant. That's great. So, again, we were talking in the back, and this is a crew a lot like a lot of entrepreneurs. Nobody here really went to a business school and majored in business or anything like that. Delaney was early education major, was actually a teacher, and TU was started as a teacher school. So I guess, Delaney, I'd ask you, as you started this process, you went through it, and you're at 200 plus caregivers at this point.
In all time, we've had about 500.
Yeah. So quite a bit. So as you've gone through this, like what was out there that you wish you knew before?
I think that one thing I wish I knew earlier on about startups and about entrepreneurship in general, I really didn't have any kind of background information on running a business or anything related to tech at all from the get-go. And going into school, my mom was a teacher, my grandmas were teachers. I just, that's what I knew, that's what I picked. I love kids. But I wish that I knew more about what I could do with my degree and the different ways that you could use really any degree to start something and to help solve a problem that a lot of people have.
Yeah, it's, and your story is pretty, it's pretty commendable in the sense that you were just a broke college kid, and needed some income, and started doing childcare, and you knew there were more of you out there. So it's definitely very good. So, here in this building, we have the accelerator, and we're looking for basically new ventures, right? Things of that nature. And we have upstairs called SBDC, where if somebody wants to come in and, open up a restaurant or a landscaping company, they can talk to SBDC. But what's great about what we have up here today is we have 3 ventures that are up here. So, Stacey, tell us a little bit about BROMO and what your plans are for scalability and further things down the road.
So one thing to note around the Baltimore garment industry and industries that are in developed countries, there are few skilled sewers remaining. We exported the skill, and we also exported the education. So we stopped training our workforce, as we saw during the pandemic, that they were struggling to find sewers, or struggling to find people to stitch garment, masks in particular, in the United States. So we struggled with the idea of being able to scale, because we have people demanding certain garments to be made, but they don't know how to make at an industrial level, high quality garments that are like, you can compete in a kind of international landscape and charge a living wage. And we're trying to raise the wage. So in terms of scalability, one thing we found out was the problem we were solving was not the right one. We thought, how do you revitalize industry? Well, you take over a factory, you bring it back to life. No, actually, we keep people sewing again. So the skill on a kind of United States level, people were fiddling with their sewing machines. Some people were able to figure it out. Home economics doesn't really exist anymore. And now people actually come to us wanting to make their own clothes. So that was a big move for us to scale within a new concept of fashion in a box, where we actually send you all the kind of HelloFresh cut work and you sew it yourself. But we have the video modules that reach that. So we couldn't scale on the basis of garment workers making clothes, which we do have that part. But we then realized, well, there's a whole workforce of people wanting to make themselves clothes. So that's where we were realizing, hey, this isn't a United States trouble situation. This is an international one. People want to sew garments of quality. They don't want craftsy garments. So that was our solution.
Yeah, and it was definitely, so that's what's referred to as edging, right? And there's a myriad of companies from, Instagram was an app called Bourbon before, that goes on, where you had this one thing you were solving, but then something else came along and you kind of pivoted on that. And so, as it comes to like investments, right? There's that analogy of the jockey and the horse, and people have gone through the accelerator, right? I've heard that one. So the horse being the market opportunity that you're going after, and the jockey being the management team that's taking it to market. And with TechSlice, you guys are basically looking at, okay, what companies do we really want to bring in here? So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we have a pretty competitive landscape. We only take on 3 to 5 product ideas a year where we do, we'll do our regular service-based contracts, but we'll do our contract plus equity arrangements and really accelerate those startups through different growth phases. We really look for, one, likability. I mean, it's a marriage of sorts. Like, can I be married to you for the next 3 to 5 years or perpetually longer? Like, how coachable are you? Because we're going to be in business together. That's a huge, with hiring or partnering or anyone in business, even our vendors, we look for that. Secondly, it's, do you know your business? Maybe you don't know everything and we understand things are gonna have to pivot. No one foresaw COVID and the needs to pivot there. So we're not expecting you to have a crystal ball, but do you know your numbers? Do you know your market? Do you know your competitors? And are you being realistic about that? The third point would really be, do I understand your market? Do I feel like based on what you've given me, that I have a clear indication of where I fit in? And fourth is, how can I help, right? Am I really the right fit for you? Can we actually provide value not only now, but in the foreseeable future? So those are the 4 main criteria that I think most investors look at, but us particularly when we actually look at our equity ventures. Our overall statement is we want to build things that are and support companies that are actually making a difference here locally, but you're looking to change lives or improve lives in some way.
Yeah, because it was just submitting a spreadsheet, right? That's what we all do, and we'll be like, I'll look it over and you make your pick and it'll be easy enough, and that's just obviously not how it's going to work. And so, we always hear about entrepreneurs and like they kind of go through the grind, right? And you got to work and just not be deterred. And I guess Stacey, I'd ask you, look, you were overseas, you were in the highest end of the fashion industry. What stories can you give us on that?
Well, when I came back to Baltimore, I was originally from Baltimore, but I went to school in Europe and then set up my own brand in Indonesia. Coming back after 10 years, I had no network here, really. It'd been so long. And I realized there was an industry that no longer existed. And it's very, it's not even dormant anymore. It's actually sort of dead. I worked for the last factory from the original industry. And as much as I supported that factory, I realized this is not the future. Like a sweatshop equivalent in the United States is not what we stand for. And that was hard as a young person who's coming into a space, who's only been on the luxury side and then on the factory side in Asia, to say, well, why are we doing this here in the United States? So then in December this past year, we needed this factory, we needed this space, and we didn't have the funding. I ran 200 miles in 8 days, which was 30 miles a day. But that was probably the hardest physically, mentally, but it brought awareness to what we were doing. But that was not as hard as what it took after that point when we opened the factory and we had commitment to the workers, to the industry, to the future, and to be able to say no to what seemed like tradition and history and heritage, to say that's a broken system and let's reimagine it and let's try it out. I think that was harder than the run, because you, as someone who comes from like academia, you want to follow systems and frameworks and structures that work or seem like they work. And even if they don't work perfectly, you want to stay in that lane. But to break free from that lane, to say, let's try something different, is hard, but it feels right.
So you did actual sweat equity, you can say, right?
It was freezing. It was the dead of winter, so I didn't sweat that much, but the sweat equity in the brain and the emotions was the real hard part.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, there's kind of talk about in classes and stuff, the 5 different innovations, how do you sell a mousetrap, how do you build a mousetrap, right? All that type of stuff. And Delaney, it's very clear to me after, being, kind of tied to you in the accelerator, how much your clients, really value, what you're bringing to the table. And so what do you, tell us a little bit about what you're doing to ensure that, your clients come to you and they stay with Minutes for Moms.
I think that for us, it's a little bit double interesting because our users are our care providers and also our families. So I kind of have to cater to both of those groups. And at first, when I, first started this, I really had no idea, what I was doing or, that this was even a business. But when I was first starting, I was really only focused on families and the problems that families were facing and how I could, create something that would make their lives easier and that would bring value to them. And then I realized, the more and more that I did this and the more time that went by, that there was this other market that I'm trying to do the same thing for our care providers and solve the problems that they're facing and the problems that I face as a care provider, because that was really the reason that I started in the first place. So definitely just having to know your people, know your audience as your employees, your contractors, and your customers, just really knowing who they are and what's important to them and what will bring value to their lives. And then, using that innovation side of the brain to figure out, how you can creatively solve a problem on a bigger scale.
So, we are featuring women entrepreneurs, and I think it's, let's just say telling, something that happened. You and I had posted, so Delaney is at a point where she can be invested in. She's certainly proved her market out. She has everything. She has the right revenue. It's all there. And you're interested in having a female lead. And so during the accelerator, I had posted to LinkedIn that, we were looking for this female lead. It was a challenge. I know of only one female partner at a VC firm, not that you're ready for VC, but I know that's how sparse it is for females in that industry. And we posted out there. My LinkedIn usually gets some, pretty good traction. And what happened?
We got 0.
We got goose egg. It was really sad. It was really telling and sad. But I think what is worthy of being, dare I say, applauded is that Delaney then turned to her customer base, who loves her, and said, and tell us about that just really quickly.
So I turned to my customer base. I sent an email to all of our active families. So not of all time, just a small group of, the people who are currently active. And I basically told them, where we are and where we're trying to go. And I ended up having 6 moms reach out to me that were interested in learning more about, investing and what that means for them and how it works, and willing to kind of, step out of their comfort zone and ask. And I think that it's really incredible that we could have this opportunity to work with moms who are investing for the first time. But then it also made me think a lot about, how many moms were probably interested but just didn't want to email and ask. So I think there's a lot to be done there too, of just, educating women on the different types of investments that, we can make.
So I think what is to be applauded is, we weren't trying to get into the old boys club. There was a new club being built, and it was being built by moms. So I think that's pretty awesome. All right, so going back to investing. So Juliana, we're talking about, we talked about the jockey and the horse before. Where would you say, you want to see these ventures? Like, where would you say you want to see them in their traction and their MVP that you start to take an interest in them?
Yeah, that's such a variable question. I think that's one of the issues around investing. There's so many different types of firms, so depending on what your stage is, you're going to want to look for certain things at different stages. For us, we're pretty early stage, so we deal in ideation to commercialization. So that's usually seed, self-funding to Series A. So that's where us personally. But Baltimore is ripe with a lot of seed and angel investment opportunities and groups here. Like, if anyone's at that stage, I'm happy to connect. But really, we're looking for people. Traction's the biggest thing, and it's like, is this something that you're day in, day out thinking? Like, I would go to sleep, and this is all I'm thinking about. type of personality because it is an emotional roller coaster. It does take a lot of other investment that's beyond, sweat. The mental aspect that you mentioned is often the most challenging. It's like, hey, are you really ready to commit to this? I wasn't ready to commit for like 2 years. So it's just knowing that you're ready, knowing that, come what may, COVID or whatever else, that you're ready to sustain kind of the weather. So I think traction and really that grit and grace balance is super important.
Yeah, no, it's basically, they can't be involved with the company. They gotta be committed to it.
Yeah.
They gotta be fully in there. So it's good to hear you kind of say that went back, because that's certainly something we talk about. So I guess this wasn't on the list I sent you guys, but bring it up. We were in the back talking about, these are 3 ventures that they are growing through organic growth or through their own investment. And so we kind of talked about, that, and you got to be a leader, right? These are the CEOs of the company. And so does anybody want to talk about anything in that regard? And I guess I would also ask, we were kind of telling war stories in the back about being that CEO. What am I maybe missing, as a guy, right? Because I told my stories, but I'm not, am I missing something that if you guys go through that I didn't have to?
I would say that just in general, in terms of leadership, I never paid much attention to it in the sense of I was always a manager that progressed. But now as you take on a role where there's no going into the stock room, there's no kind of hiding, you're always going to have to be present. So the biggest investment, it's easy to say, is in yourself. But a lot of the times we don't do that because we're so busy making sure everyone else is okay, that the business is okay, that everything is growing. But you really have to find that space at the start, because bad habits start, when I say bad habits, I mean workaholic. It's because you love it that much and you care about it. But if you can create those systems and figure out that's the biggest investment in being a leader, I think is possible, because you're continuing to fuel yourself with not just on empty. And that has to be a continuous thing as you grow. So I would say that was a big learning for me, where I'm like, yeah, I can run, and then I'll just like fall down, and then I'll get back up, and then I'll heal myself, and then I'll start again. But if you can pace it responsibly along the way, you'll be in it for the long run. Yeah,
and it's certainly the feedback that we kind of keep hearing, at least with ventures upstairs, is they get so much out of being together. That you're not just by yourself. And now you have somebody that's kind of a member of the group that can empathize with you because they've gone through it. And look, we talked about how, we have a group here that didn't go through typical college or business or anything like that. Most entrepreneurs that I know that are very successful, they all kind of start with, I never thought I would be doing this, right? They never thought that. I was a chemistry major. So, Delaney, what did you do, prior that you think maybe helped you prepare to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I think outside of preparing, I think like the beginning of my story is, that I have a learning disability, and in middle school, I remember I had a teacher who told the entire class that I was slow. And I had that in the back of my head for the entire time, I was still in school. And I kept saying, I want to be a teacher so that no other child has to hear that from their teacher. And I think that was sort of an ammunition for me to, once I started with this business and I started figuring out that it was a business, I had a lot of people say, oh no, you can't do that, or oh no, you're an education major, how do you think you're going to do an Excel spreadsheet? And, just the silly little things. And I think that really, lit the fire for me, that I wanted to learn everything I could to figure out this problem, to solve this problem, but also just, to be the best in my lane, and then to help other people get to their thing that they're trying to achieve. And I think that that's a really cool part about our business is, we're helping moms specifically, but parents in general, to have more time to be able to get to the places they want to be and be successful on all fronts of their own lives. And but I think in a more technical sense, I think I really knew my problem. I think having 3 years of teaching experience and working with parents and working with kids and working in a school setting really set me up for success in this business. And I think, you know, my biggest advice to anybody who's trying to get into creating their own business is to really know it through and through.
We were talking backstage, and we all kind of unanimously agreed that if you're somewhat interested in this and thinking about it and you're young, go get a job selling something. You know, absolutely. Entrepreneurship is only one of two things. You're building or you're selling. There's nothing else. There's no like, oh, let me do some financial forecast. You know, we're early on, that's not happening. So go get a job selling something. It will benefit you in more ways than one. And we all had unanimously agreed upon that. So, you know, look, as you do build this venture out, right? You know, you start, these three are all founders and CEOs, and your business opportunities come along. What's just as important is the team. And so, you know, Juliana, I'd ask you, you know, you're building your team out. How did you do it? And like, what were you looking for when you were adding people to your team?
Well, I do think hiring and recruiting is an art. I mean, you were talking about your how many staff you have. I'm like, gosh, I can't even imagine being that big. But, you know, so I've been recruiting in the area for 10 years. And my biggest thing, you know, I was always very hyper-focused on technical, can they do the job? And like really that big interview process of, do they really know what they're talking about? Are they being honest and genuine with me? But when it comes down to our company, what I found out, and I was even talking about this morning, is who that person is at their core. Like what makes them tick and those motivations. Are they going to be that person that's taking that initiative? We have like our core values, and I used to think, you know, every company has those. I'm like, okay, are you really paying attention to that? But ours, I mean, I think every single person on our team really does embody that, and it's being accountable, being really intentional, and being results driven. Those are our three main things that we look for. But more often, like we just hired a project coordinator, and she didn't have a background in tech. She wanted to transition industries from events to technology, and no one had really given her that opportunity. Our space is highly skilled technical folks. We can't afford to just have somebody non-technical not billing, but you know, I decided to take a chance on her, and it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I am so grateful to have her on our team. And I think she embodies that, you know, that willingness to try and the willingness to fail and take leadership and accountability over whatever the task is, even if she doesn't know necessarily what everything is or how to do it, she'll find it out. Or pull in other team members and not be afraid to raise her hand. So I think that's the biggest thing. And I think the team and environment definitely makes a difference in that regard. But that's what I look for, is really the core of who that person is.
Yes, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying her resume on paper, right? Literally, she wouldn't have gotten through the door, right?
Never.
Yeah,
She would have never gotten an application.
Yep.
No.
And then just, oddly enough, this is the first time Juliana and I have met
Yes.
in person. And so when we met, I said, yeah, you have this employee on LinkedIn that seems to really be drilling it. And that was exactly who she was just talking about. It was exactly that person. So
She's amazing.
yeah. So definitely take, and that goes back to kind of like taking your first step as an entrepreneur. If you want to get into the industry, you know, just make yourself available. And there's that saying, nothing replaces motivation. So I definitely agree with that. So we have a question here from the audience online, and that is on your first first customer. It doesn't matter the industry. You all are in different industries. But does anybody want to talk about how they got their first customer?
I'll take this one. So I started my business by posting on Facebook. It wasn't intended to be a business, but I was looking for flexible work that would help me to pay for school and things at school. So I posted on Facebook looking for any kind of odd job. And I had so many people respond to this posting that I selected my schedule. I found a ton of different families to work for, doing anything from babysitting, driving kids around, painting fences. And I had so many people interested that I started having to say no to people. And I had one parent that was so persistent. They were like, how could you possibly say no to me? How could you possibly say no to me? And then I found the friends and started matching my friends with these other parents who I had to say no to. So I think it's really interesting when you have something that's really important. It just kind of works out. It just kind of happens.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, you're dealing with families, then you're dealing kind of with, I don't want to say, you're dealing with companies basically, but
Yeah,
companies are made of people.
we're incubating companies literally from idea phase. So maybe they had just filed their paperwork or they're going to file the paperwork. And so we're basically kind of their startup consultants. And so, I mean, we're dealing with historically the most stubborn, difficult personality types to deal with, like entrepreneurs and doctors. So it's been an interesting journey. I don't have a medical background. I don't have a technical background. Everything's kind of self-taught. So I'm not your traditional founder, would you say? But my first customer, we met at Atwater's in Canton at a coffee shop, and they walk in. I have really no idea who this guy was, and I'm kind of glad I didn't do the background research. But again, recruiting and setting up teams, and a lot of clients like first call like, "Hey, Juliana, I know you'll know somebody or be able to build a team for me that can solve this problem." And that was just kind of how things started happening. So we met at a coffee shop. We started poking holes in the idea. My whole role was like, be the 2-year-old in the room. But why? But why? How is this adding value? And soon enough, we were like, well, this would be an interesting thought experiment, proof of concept. And turns out we're working with some of the best neurosurgeons in the country and one of the leading experts of consciousness in the brain. And I was like, oh. And then you walk into like a lot of these hospital settings, and I didn't really realize what we were getting ourselves into. And then we're like, oh, cool. And we were able to, we sat in a boardroom full of investors and doctors and all these like great, brilliant minds. And they're like, I'm this female in the room that looks very different from everyone else around me. And they're like, all right, 5 years, $5 million. I'm like, okay, so I think I can do this, and give me a fraction of that in a year and a half. And within that time frame, we were able to create something from a concept and get it out to market for this client and able to save people's lives. So even when we were testing that application in a hospital setting, if it had been a week later, this mom wouldn't have gone home to her family. So being able to take something when everyone's telling you, no, you can't do this. I was awful at math, like trying to go through engineering school. They're like, I was one of 3 females in my engineering class. And I think 2 of us were left at the end, and it's, people always like to try and put you in boxes, and you just kind of have to put the blinders on and be like, your opinion doesn't matter here. It doesn't, and this is what I'm gonna do, and I think I can do this, and then just go figure it out.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
soapbox.
No, and that's just it too. Like if there was a process for this success, we would just give you the book and say, read the book, do what the book says, and do it. But that's the whole thing about entrepreneurship, as you guys all know. There is no process. You need to go figure out the process, right? And outsiders refer to that as, when it doesn't work, as failure. Us as business owners, we're like, I didn't fail. That just didn't work, right? Like, I'm gonna find the way that does work. And it was famously said by Edison, how did it feel to fail 10,000 times? He said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. The light bulb was a journey of 10,000 steps. And so, with that understanding, Stacey, what else would you kind of give as, not necessarily advice, but kind of like understanding to a young entrepreneur that's interested in this?
Having been on the other side of the room, I think seeing where we are now, it's like, how is that sort of like even possible? Being on the other side of that room, I actually started from that perspective where 5 years ago when I came back to Baltimore, I was at an innovation center at University of Baltimore. I started giving talks and asking people, I haven't been here in a while, how do we revitalize industry? So we brought people that were from the original industry. And so I just kept on searching for the people that had ideas, and we just created ideas. And then the room turned from like, actually our first event had 50 people. So I'm like, wow, people care about this. And there were people from little teenagers wanting to start a fashion label to someone whose mother worked in the garment industry back, when it actually was one. And so we as a community for 3 to 4 years just kept on talking about the revitalization of industry, and different stakeholders came to the surface. And you fast forward to today, our first student was an educator, or is an educator at MICA. And then they started showing themselves who's willing to pay for this. So I would say don't necessarily rush to create the solution, actually start asking the questions to the people who would be a part of that kind of buying group, not as a focus group, but as that kind of development phase of like, maybe the moms, like, what do you guys really need? Like, what's a problem? Like, that was our biggest mistake, is even as we got to that, 5-year mark and we came up with our solutions, it iterated, because the what we were solving wasn't necessarily the right one, but we only knew that by going out there and not failing, but going into that space and saying, okay, the market decides. They're willing to pay for a lot of classes to learn to make their own garments. They don't want to pay for us to make their clothes. They want to make their clothes. So you have to go on that journey, but be okay with the changes, because sometimes you're like, no, we worked so hard on this. Why would we just leave that behind? It's not. Actually, you've now built the building block that now you can stand up that view of seeing it in a whole different way. And you could only have done that by climbing those stairs and from that landscape.
So we were talking, backstage about how my wife she owns her own company. She's a CEO. And when I say she takes every phone call on speaker, and holds the phone like this, I'm saying it's every single phone call. And I have heard people in a business discussion with her refer to her as honey. And, she goes and smacks that down immediately. And so we want to celebrate your successes, but what have you ever experienced? What have you guys experienced in that regard?
I personally have even had other women say things and do things that put me down, being younger than them. And I think that it's really kind of alarming, because you expect that all women are going to be on your side, and you expect that because that's what you would do for other women. And, at the very beginning, when I first started this business, I had a mom call, and she was angry. She said that I drove up the prices of babysitting in our entire town, and it was all my fault that she could not get a babysitter. And I said, you know what? It's not all my fault, and we have plenty of babysitters here for you. You could come use us, and I tried and I tried again, and she just was angry. She was like, I'm going to use all of your babysitters behind your back, and she just kept coming at me, and she was threatening me. She's saying that she was going to sue on behalf of all of my babysitters. And I could not get this woman to back down until my father got on the phone. And I think that is so beyond unfortunate that it's just, what you're saying, but worse, because it's coming from another woman who you expect, is going to be supportive. And my dad's point to her was, you have a daughter. Would you want me to do this to your daughter? And that's when she really, sat back and apologized. But I think it's hard, and it will be hard for a long time until we have more women in places of power.
Yeah, and it's women. There's a parity in pay between women and men, and yet you're helping bridge that. Okay. Good logic on that one. Right?
Yeah, I do have to say, I'm a woman in tech.
Yeah, enough said, right?
There is that, and especially when you're dealing with other men in a male-dominated industry, in what typically a lot of those men are in positions of power. How does it affect that dynamic in the room? Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's put me in a position to know what the angles are, know what my ask is, but also, especially having my daughter give me a little bit more of a backbone and be like, what I want this to happen to my daughter, what I want my daughter to stand for this. I think that's a big part of, over time, again, fortunately or unfortunately, over the last 10 years, I think it is really important to kind of role play in your head. If this happens, here's what I'm going to do, because a lot of times when you're in that power dynamic, you kind of freeze up. You're like, did this really happen to me? Did they really just say that? So I do think, as a female founder or a woman in position of power, I think it's important for you in your interactions with other people to even have those role plays in your head. And it sucks to even say, but even for other women in your company, if this happens, what are you going to do? And I think having that worked out ahead of time, or here's this responses, instead of hesitating, it's sometimes it comes out and you're like, okay, and then you can deal with that issue and remediate it and level set. And I've had very direct conversations with people this is not appropriate. Would you do this to a male colleague? And kind of reframing it for them. I've had them come back and apologize, and I've never had any issues with them since. But I think it's important to get comfortable, or at least rehearse in your head of like how you might handle those interactions.
But it's sage advice, because the unfortunate reality is it's going to occur.
Yeah,
You know,
that
like
personally has helped me significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. So want to see if does anybody in the audience have any questions for any of our entrepreneurs?
Come on, guys, we're here.
There we go.
Hi, I'm Paige. I'm a product manager. I run two software products. I had a question, I think more specifically for Juliana. When you're looking to hire engineers, I know I've had this experience when I walk into the interview room and I'm the one doing the interview, and it's a male individual coming in. Have you had any like issues or pushback? Because I've seen it, and I've also seen like great interactions, so I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, it's nice running the company though.
Yeah.
Because if they're not okay with the female founder, they're probably not going to.
It's an easy cut.
Yeah, but again, it's been different. Like again, I've been a technical recruiter, and I've actually had interactions where certain people, certain race or ethnicities or whatever it may be, or just that specific individual, where they don't and they want to talk to a male counterpart. But the thing is, I think diversity does bring in a better work culture and environment. I think the people that gravitate towards that are going to be the ones that gravitate towards that interview situation. So it depends on the culture you're trying to create. So yes, you'll get pushback, but there's so many other people in the world who aren't like that. I mean, a lot of guys who are just whatever, but you know, there's so many other people who are amazing and supportive, and there's a lot less crappy people out in the world than there are otherwise.
So I guess as we kind of close it up, you know, go down the line, what would you say is the biggest mistake you made, but then also the biggest success you're yet to have? So we'll start with Stacey.
I think I came from a world of fashion where it's very like money driven and luxury, and sales kind of indicate performance. So I went to the full other side where I was so social driven. I was so all about the people. It can't be too polar in one way or the other. So I'm actually finding my way back to that middle ground where start with the good, like what is the good that we're doing within the world and our work, but make sure it performs. So bring that sales, build that into that social sales-driven business mind. I think that's where it's hard to be in those two brains. So sometimes one day you have to focus on one to the other, but we are now in a space where this is the future. The future is not a choice between sales or social. It's actually a conversion, a marriage of the two. So I'm glad that I struggled through coming from that world, like oscillating there, but be careful with being too social, because then you're vulnerable financially and you actually do a disservice to the people that you're trying to help. So I would say to find that middle ground with strength.
Okay. Biggest mistake is hard because I've definitely had a lot of those mistakes. I think probably the biggest would be, I asked for help a lot along the way, but I never really was willing to bring people on my team. It was very, very hard for me to outsource various tasks. Like I always wanted to do everything, and I wanted to be able to do everything. And I could not, let myself give tasks away. And I think now my greatest success in basically the opposite of that is building a team and finding people that really see the value and the vision that I do, and who are really good people. As you said, there's a lot more great people than not, and finding ones that share your vision, I think, is like the best thing that you can do for any venture that you're trying to have.
That's great.
I was afraid to fail. Now I'm used to it. So, another thing is, there was one point where I forgot to have fun. Life is supposed to be fun, and yes, we're serious, and we're dealing with crazy brain stuff and all kinds of other medical applications. And at the end of the day, it's yes, there's balance that equation. You know, there is that grit, but you also need to have grace with yourself. And I think the other lessons learned, if anything, is kind of what you were saying before, is managing, working on your business rather than in your business, because that gives you that creative time that you time back so you can be the best version of yourself. So you're bringing that to the team. If you're depleted and not recharging yourself, it's just going to create problems. In my experience, when you can, and we know, like, we run each other down or run ourselves down into the ground, and we're like, that's okay, we'll get back up. We just need like 2 hours of sleep. We got this. But I think me focusing on being a better me, being a better mother, being better to myself has, you know, paid dividends in spades, I think, for the company. So it's not only a good thing to do, but it helps profits.
Yeah, and I would say to everybody, you know, the important thing to remember, and we're showing you here right now, is to understand this came together, you know, very quickly for myself, Ken, and artists, and we pulled together. But they're here not to, you know, talk just about themselves, but to help. They're all busy. They all have, you know, really, you know, fast-moving, successful ventures, and they're here, you know, to not brag on themselves, but to help. So bear that in mind. And we're certainly very, very happy to have you guys. You know, we really wish you the best of luck. I know we're all going to stay in touch. It is Baltimore, but with that said, you know, we're gonna stay in touch. As we wrap up, it's important. Got to thank Ken and artists who are on the team, and Sharon Grove's team for helping us out. And then lastly, these great successful CEOs and ventures. So thanks. So help us up to coffee and to converse with these fine entrepreneurs, and thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.